Oh, Canada, our home and native land, through great love, in our hearts command, with glowing hearts we see rise the true north strong and free. From far and wide, oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh Canada, we stand. Oh, we stand on guard for thee.
Okay, are we ready to go? Excellent, thank you. Madam Clerk, roll call, please. He's good. He waved at me. Yeah, we're good. Oh, I need to.
Councillor Mackey sends his regrets today. Councillor Gamble.
Present.
Councillor Burley.
Present.
Councillor Carlton.
Present.
Sorry, Rob, is Councillor Carlton? Yes, okay, there we go. Just switch screens.
Yeah.
Councillor McQueen.
Present.
Councillor Desai. Councillor Patterson. Warden Hicks.
Here.
Councillor Clumpus. Councillor Keaveney. Councillor Body. Councillor O'Leary. Councillor Woodbury. Councillor Milne. Councillor Swever. Councillor Bourgneau.
Present.
Councillor Robinson. Councillor Hutchinson.
Present.
We have all members here with the exception of Councillor Mackey.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And I should acknowledge that we have some cheeky people coming back from the FCM conference, so I hope they'll behave themselves now for council. For all of you. Okay. Item number 4 is the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge with respect the history, spirituality, and culture of the Anishinaabe, the Six Nations of the Grand River, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat, Wyandot peoples, on whose traditional territories we gather and whose ancestors signed treaties with our ancestors. We recognize also the Métis and Inuit, whose ancestors shared this land and these waters. May we all, as treaty people, live with respect on this land and live in peace and friendship with all of its diverse peoples. Council, is there any declaration of interest, pecuniary or otherwise? Seeing none, I would just say you can declare it if one comes up during the course of the meeting. We're on to item 6A, which is the County Council and Committee of the Whole minutes dated May 26. I need a mover, please. So moved by Councillor Hutchison and seconded by Councillor O'Leary. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Is there anyone opposed? That is carried. Thank you. We now have Committee of the Whole close meeting minutes dated May 26. I need a mover, please. Councillor Keaveney and Councillor Clumpus. And so I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? That too carries. We do not have a closed meeting matter in this agenda. Item 8 is the Board of Health minutes, which are dated April 29th. I do need a mover. Going to go with Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Bordignon. I believe Dr. Era is with us.
Good morning, Mr. Warden. Good morning, Council.
Good morning.
Update from the last board meeting is brief and positive. The situation with COVID continues to be reassuring, with all the indicators trending the right direction. Number of new cases is a handful, less than 5 per day for the past few days. Hospitalization, ICU numbers are minimal. Outbreaks are less than 5 as well. Outbreaks quite manageable. The second part in the update to the board at the last meeting was about the circulating monkeypox virus, and I provided an update to the board. And the gist of it is the disease is not expected to be a threat to the function of the healthcare system. That is an endemic in Africa for over the past 50 years, and now there are certain indications that clusters or outbreaks of it existed in different jurisdictions outside of Africa. The surveillance for this disease is ramping up, so we will see more cases. But in Grey Bruce, we have the case and contact management of the disease assigned to the health unit, and we're connected with the healthcare system locally. We're connected with the province, with other health units, and rolling out a vaccine for prophylaxis at this point is active in case there's identification of any case. Worth mentioning, in Canada today, June 7th, that's the last report from PHAC, Public Health Agency of Canada, there are 81 cases. And as I mentioned, the surveillance for this disease is active and ramping up, and I'll keep the council up to date. That's my update, Mr. Warden. Open to questions as always.
Thank you very much, Dr. Era. Are there any questions for Dr. Era? There are none, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I understand Councillor Patterson has nothing to add this time. So with that said, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Is there anyone opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much. All right, we're on to, there are no bylaws for us to consider. We're on to item 10, good news and celebrations. Does anyone have anything? Councillor Desai.
Thank you, Warden Hicks. Welcome back, first of all. So I have 2 pieces of good news and celebration. On June 9th, the CN Tower was lit purple for Spinal CSF Leak Awareness Week. And I know that's not within our community, but it's important that we talk about spinal CSF leak awareness, because it is one of those physical brain issues that is often underdiagnosed and is not recognized quick enough or early enough, because it is a fairly new issue that has been discovered recently. And also, as you mentioned, on Monday, 3 illustrious members of this county council, Warden Hicks, returned from Regina, which I quote the mayor of Regina, Sandra Masters, when I say it is a city that rhymes with fun. That's an exact quote from a conference speech. It was a terrific conference in the sense of being able to network with municipal leaders from across the country, and it was also interesting to see how many challenges are very common. Affordable housing is an issue. Reliable internet access is an issue. It was also interesting to see how different municipalities function under their provincial structure across the country, and the varying levels of autonomy. And yeah, there's any further questions with regards to the conference, I'm happy to answer them. But it was a terrific experience. Thank you, Warden Hicks.
Thank you, Councillor Desai. Councillor Keaveney.
my microphone. I apologize. Good morning, County Council, and welcome back, Mr. Warden. And I just wanted to share that a Ukrainian family has arrived in Meaford. We have a restaurant in town that's owned by a Russian family, so the language barrier is minimal. And we are very pleased to have them in our community. They have been connected with Grey Bruce Settlement and Language Services for assistance with access programs and housing and employment. So we wish them all the very best of luck and welcome them to Grey County. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Keaveney. Councillor Body, you're next.
Thank you, Councillor Hicks. I've actually got 4 things that I hope are quick. One is just triggered by Shirley's comments. The city is making available the Rice House, which is a small house owned by the city in front of the art gallery. I know the county has used it for housing in the past, but didn't need it at this point. So we're making it available for Ukrainian refugees that are coming, and look forward to seeing it being used. Second thing, I was at Billy Bishop Museum last night. They put on a great display that just opened on Canadian veterans and local veterans involved in Afghanistan. They've done videos that you can go in and use your telephone with QR codes and be able to see the videos, and they tell a pretty raw story, some of them, of life in Afghanistan and what went on. And it's great that these will be captured and go into the computer library, so to speak, for years to come, for kids to be able to, or anybody to be able to go and see these interviews in the future. It's a very nice display. Alex Rupp was very much involved in creating it and putting some of his pieces in. So I encourage everyone to go and have a look. Number 3, I noticed yesterday that Georgian College has signed a memo of understanding with the Nuclear Innovation Institute. Congratulations to Kevin Weaver, who's taking over the lead at Georgian College and is a great Bruce boy, so he understands what goes on in this part of the world. And I think this is probably a first step of that memo of understanding that I thought for years that I wish that Georgian College was more tied with Bruce Power for labor training and technology and all that stuff. So it's good to see this being started. We're down to number 4. I attended the Psw Canada Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Conference about 2 weeks ago. Very interesting. There's a lot going on in hydrogen. The big message was that we need to develop the infrastructure going forward to get it more like Germany and Europe into mass production. There's a lot of stuff going on in northern Alberta, which is amazingly the largest hydrogen producer in the country. Obviously, Ontario with nuclear and Quebec with hydro, water production are the cleanest. Interesting, China is leading the world in hydrogen production and has a plan of getting their automobiles onto hydrogen and using, as is Alberta, using carbon capture to clean the air after they've used natural gas to produce the hydrogen. So fascinating things coming, and it's changing rapidly. A couple of years ago, they weren't talking about hydrogen whatsoever, and it was all batteries. And now hydrogen is starting to become almost equal with batteries when you're looking at large trucking, busing, those types of things. At this point, it's still too expensive to get into small buses that we can use in Owen Sound, but 5 years' time, possible. So anyway, that's my report. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Body. Next is Councillor Bordignon.
Thank you, Mr. Warden, and welcome back. Spent most of last week at the first annual Blue Mountain Film Festival, which was a great success. It garnered North American-wide attention with many film producers, both from Canada and from the US. We had a great opening film from showcasing our North and Inuit people. We also did a bus tour of film producers, location scouts throughout the TBM and spoke to Grey County as a whole in regards to opportunities for economic development in filming, taking them out of Toronto. They've been moving to areas like Hamilton and Oshawa for economy's sake, and we're just enthralled with all that Grey County and the Blue Mountains has to offer. It was great to see Grey County's economic development people with a table at the film festival. So overall, it was very well received for the very first one, and they're looking forward to doing more business, not just in the second annual film festival coming next June, but also in looking at filming opportunities for Blue Mountain and a lot of Grey County. So I just wanted to report that it was a great success. Thank you, Mr. Warden.
Thank you, Councillor Bordignon. Next is Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Warden, and good morning, County Council. There certainly is a lot going on in Grey County. It's evident just by the good news and celebrations. I would just like to alert or remind County Council that the Durham Homecoming is fast approaching. That will take place from June 30th to July 3rd. So I encourage everyone to participate. It'll be a wonderful community event. This Saturday from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. will be the Durham Herb Fair, sponsored by the Durham and District Horticultural Society. It certainly is always a wonderful event, lots to do there and to shop. Back in May 28th to be exact, the Neustadt Lions Club held a very successful crab, steak and lobster fest. Certainly that was anticipated. It's been a few years before we were able to participate in the most delicious food. And as a AMO board member, I would be remiss if I didn't remind my fellow colleagues that the AMO conference is coming up in Ottawa, and I would encourage everyone to register. It certainly looks like it will be a wonderful event. There's always a lot to do here in Grey County, and we can celebrate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. I do not, Councillor Silver.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Warden. Just like to advise council that I was pleased to attend the ribbon cutting for the expansion of the Thornbury Cider and Brew House in Thornbury. This is a venture of Thornbury Craft Co., which is owned by Colio Estate Wineries. And so they have expanded the cider house, which was in the old Thornbury Apple Storage building. They've renovated that and greatly expanded that, and they're now brewing beer there as well. And so that's more employment, and they've got an expanded retail space and everything. And they're doing a really good job on doing craft beer there. In fact, their Thornbury pickup number 26 Pilsner, where it won the world's best lager Czech style pale category at the World Beer Awards in September 2021. So it's a greatly expanded business on our main street, and I was pleased to be there for the opening. It was very busy, and you know, we have a lot of visitors that are now starting to enjoy a whole winery, cidery, and now brewery tours, because these craft breweries are opening up. Thank you very much, Mr. Warden.
Thank you, Councillor Silver. Deputy Warden McQueen.
Thank you, Mr. Warden, and welcome back. And I just want to, on behalf of County Council and myself as the Deputy Warden, thank you for putting your name forward and others. I think it's very important for our democratic process that individuals do put their name forward. So again, thank you for doing that. Also, attended George Shaffer's Celebration of Life last Saturday. 13 past wardens, and including yourself, Mr. Warden, was there, and it was a nice reflection of George's contribution to municipal life. And also our Ram Rodeo was a success, and again, look forward to next year having that again. So again, thank you, Mr. Warden.
Thank you, Deputy Warden. I do not see anyone else. So with that said, we'll perhaps move on to adjournment. Looking for a mover, please. It's usually Councillor Burley. And I'll go, I'll go with Councillor Gamble. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Thank you. We'll take a second to move over to Committee of the Whole. Am I good to go, Rob? Excellent. Thank you, sir. All right, I call this committee of the whole meeting to order. Is there any declaration of interest, pecuniary or otherwise? Seeing none, once again, I would ask that if one comes up during the course of the meeting, that you declare it at that time. I'm going to perhaps turn to our clerk, if I might. Would that be okay with you? About a slight amendment to the agenda.
Thank you, Warden Hicks. There has been a matter come forward regarding a potential planning litigation that if with council's indulgence, we could add to the agenda. And we would require 2/3 vote to add that on, as no prior notice has been given for that particular matter. It is regarding litigation and potential litigation and advice subject to solicitor-client privilege.
I didn't turn on my mic. I'll try that again. Moved by Councillor Robinson, seconded by Councillor Milne. Is there any discussion? I'll call the question then. All those in favor? Is there anyone opposed? No one? That's carried. Thank you. So we are going to maybe deal with the consent agenda because our guests, I think we're planning to be here for 10:30. So we'll maybe move on with the consent agenda. Is there anything that needs to be pulled from the consent agenda, council? Then I would ask for a mover to approve the consent agenda, moved by Deputy Warden McQueen. Thank you. See, you're not the only one that I mess up with that. And seconded by Councillor Clumpus. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? That is carried. Council, with your indulgence, we're going to jump to 7A, if that's okay with everyone. Dealing with the asset management plan. Just bear with me a quick second. Okay, so do we, sorry? Okay, excellent. Amanda and Sue are on deck, I understand. A little sooner than you thought. I need a mover to put the item on the floor. Maybe I can get Councillor Carlton, seconded by Councillor Robinson. You have the floor.
Thank you. Let's switch the presentation. There we go. All right. So good morning, everyone. I'm Amanda Brooks. I'm the Asset Management Coordinator, and I'm excited to be here today to share our draft 2021 Asset Management Plan with you. So to provide a bit of an overview, the county's infrastructure portfolio consists of 8 asset categories, including roads, bridges and culverts, stormwater, buildings and facilities, machinery and equipment, land improvements, vehicles, and housing. This portfolio includes every type of asset owned by Grey County and utilized to provide services to residents, from the transportation network of roads, bridges, and culverts, to housing properties, to paramedic service, emergency equipment, to economic development and cultural buildings, to long-term care facilities, to the IT hardware and computers used by council and staff members every day. To briefly summarize, asset management is the art of doing the right thing to the right asset at the right time. Good asset management practices are essential in order to ensure assets are being optimally managed so they can provide services at the lowest possible cost for the constituents of Grey. The importance of this can be emphasized by considering that the county's total asset portfolio, which historically cost the county $488 million to put into place, now has a total replacement cost of over $1.6 billion based on 2021 costing. The Asset Management Plan, or AMP, is a critical component of the county's corporate strategy. It helps to plan for optimal management of assets to continue to meet the county's mission, vision, and strategic goals. It's important to remember, however, that the state of the infrastructure as reported in the AMP is only a current snapshot in time, and AM is a continuous process with variables and factors changing each and every day that the county operates. The data presented in this plan is the best available at this point in time and will continue to evolve and improve in the future. After all, asset management is a journey, not a destination. A driving force in the development of this AMP was Ontario Regulation 588-17, Asset Management Planning for Municipal Infrastructure. Grey County completed its first strategic asset management policy in 2019 in line with the regulation's first deadline. This plan being presented today considers all the required aspects for the July 1st, 2022 deadline, as well as some additional info that will be required by the 2024 deadline. Levels of service indicate the quality, function, and capacity of an asset class and its related service area. They include both technical metrics used by staff and community or customer-oriented metrics and key performance indicators or KPIs. Levels of service should balance performance, risk, and overall program costs for an asset class. An adjustment to one of these three factors will have a direct impact on the other two. For example, if funding cuts are made and less is spent on an asset, the performance of that asset will decline, and the probability of failure of that asset will increase, along with the risks associated with that asset. Now we'll move into the state of the infrastructure as based on 2021 data, which considers the cost and performance aspects of levels of service. This section provides high-level analytics, including the total current replacement cost and overall condition information for all asset classes. Additional information, including age profiles, life cycle analysis, and upcoming replacement costs can be found in the AMP. I'll just provide an overview today. There are three major updates in this AMP from the data that was presented in April of 2021 in the 2020 Asset Management Strategy. We've been able to include stormwater assets now that the data has been gathered on storm sewers and minor culverts. We also have improved data from the 2021 Building Condition Assessments, or BCAs, which has been used to calculate the replacement costs of housing, building, and land improvement assets. Buildings are now broken up into their components, which allows us to factor in accurate replacement lifespans and costs for each component to develop more realistic replacement costs. The componentization of these assets also reallocated some pieces between categories. For example, parking lots were often included in the buildings category in the strategy and in prior AMPs, but they're now separated and accurately included in the land improvements category. Additionally, this AMP is compliant with Ontario Regulation 588-17. Overall, the county's asset portfolio has a total 2021 replacement cost of $1.63 billion. 54% of this total is the replacement cost of roads, 21% is bridges and culverts, 11% housing, 8% buildings, 3% stormwater, 1% machinery and equipment, and less than 1% is vehicles and land improvements, respectively. To compare this with the total replacement cost that was calculated in the AM strategy that was presented by Citywide in April of 2021, there is an increase of $222 million, or 16%. This increase is due to a variety of factors, including the improved data from the 2021 building condition assessments, the inclusion of the stormwater assets, and new assets that have been built or acquired, as well as, of course, inflation. Notable changes include the stormwater assets, and the changes as per the BCAs. So the land improvement assets are now split out instead of being lumped with buildings, causing the appearance of the 203% increase. And building, land improvement, and housing assets now have more realistic replacement costs and useful lifespans, since they're now broken out into their major components, which are considered individually. Overall, 88% of the county's assets are in fair or better condition. I'll provide more depth on that as we look at each class individually. Given that many infrastructure assets have lifespans of several decades, understanding the upcoming replacement needs is essential for long-term capital planning. This graph summarizes how capital assets are predicted to fluctuate over the next 50 years based on the current conditions and ages of existing county assets. As can be seen by the turquoise portions of the graph, the road network, of course, has the most significant funding requirements. The biggest spike is predicted to be in 2042 to 2051, with $650 million required. This graph also shows the county's existing infrastructure backlog in the far left corner. The infrastructure backlog is an estimate of the investments in infrastructure that have been deferred in previous years. The backlog is determined by considering asset age and condition data. As assets age, their performance typically declines, and as they reach the end of their useful lives, they must be replaced. Currently, the county's estimated backlog is $44.6 million, which is actually only 2.7% of the total portfolio's replacement cost. A significant portion of this relates to buildings and specifically Rockwood Terrace, which of course is already planned for redevelopment. Average annual capital requirements represent the amount that the county should allocate annually to each asset category to be able to meet replacement needs as they arise, to prevent further accumulation of backlogs, and to achieve long-term sustainability. These figures are a function of the replacement cost of an asset and its estimated useful life. The annual average requirement has increased by $4.5 million since 2020, which is an increase of 10%. This increase is largely due to better data now being available from the BCAs, as well as the addition of the stormwater assets and the increase in inflation. It's important to note that most municipalities across Canada struggle to allocate sufficient funding each year to their infrastructure, leading to the much discussed infrastructure deficits. Closing funding shortages and eliminating backlogs are decades-long endeavors and involve critical and objective reviews of service levels. Moving into the individual asset classes, the 869 kilometers of county roads, of course, make up the majority of the replacement cost of county assets, with a total replacement cost of $885.3 million. The roads network consists of road sections and traffic signals. The replacement costs of these assets are the best estimates of county engineering staff based upon the actual costs that were realized in 2021. Using pavement condition index ratings for road surfaces and age-based condition for road bases, 90% of the road assets are in fair or better condition. Those considered to be in poor or very poor condition are mostly road bases where the condition has been predicted based solely upon age, since better data is unavailable, and it does not necessarily reflect the actual condition that's experienced by drivers using these roads. Next, we have bridges and culverts. The county has 206 structural bridges and culverts spanning more than 3 meters, with an additional 4 significant culverts spanning less than 3 meters, for a grand total of 210 structures that have been included in this AMP. The total replacement cost of these assets is $338.3 million, as determined by the biannual Ontario Structure Inspection Manual, or OSIM inspections. Using bridge condition index ratings assigned during OSIM inspections, 81% of the county's bridges and culverts are in fair or better condition. The remaining 19% in poor condition are either scheduled for replacement within the next few years, or town line structures on local roads or pedestrian bridges, which are able to provide the required levels of service in their current state. The county's stormwater infrastructure is in place along and across its transportation network. The purpose of this network is to control runoff to make the transportation network as safe as possible. From 2018 through 2021, data was gathered on the stormwater network so it could be added to this AMP. As of 2021, it's estimated to have a total replacement cost of $55.8 million. 89% of the inspected stormwater assets are in fair or better condition, and replacement plans are being made for those in poor condition that have now been inspected. These assets are inspected by county staff when they can be easily accessed, or by a CCTV contractor where access is restricted. County buildings and facilities, excluding housing facilities, which are in a separate section to come, have an overall replacement cost of $127.8 million as determined by the 2021 BCAs. There are a total of 49 county buildings excluding housing. As determined by the BCAs, 81% of the components of the buildings and facilities are in fair or better condition. The majority of the building assets currently assessed as being in poor or worse condition are associated with Rockwood Terrace, which of course is planned for a complete redevelopment. The county's machinery and equipment portfolio is valued at approximately $16.4 million. Given the shorter lifespans and lower costs of these types of assets, the historical costs of these assets have been inflated by CPI to determine the replacement costs. 55% of machinery and equipment assets are in fair or better condition. The higher percentage of these types of assets being rated as in poor or worse condition is due to their shorter lifespans, most of these ratings being based solely on asset age, and since these assets are typically run until they're no longer useful and then replaced without much opportunity for improvement throughout their life. For example, computers and long-term care beds have short lifespans with little opportunity to improve their condition during these limited lifespans. Land improvement assets include parking lots, sidewalks, fencing, and general landscaping assets, which are associated with county buildings on county properties. As of 2021, these assets had a total replacement cost of $10.1 million. 92% of the county land improvement assets are in fair or better condition as determined in the 2021 BCAs. The county has a total of 80 vehicles that support a wide range of services. These vehicles have a 2021 replacement cost of $11.6 million. 87% of these vehicles are in fair or better condition as assessed by county staff using the fleet manual, which was developed in-house. Those that are rated poor on this scale are still functional and safe. Vehicles that were assigned a condition rating of poor are older vehicles that are either scheduled for replacement this year, have already been replaced since the making of this AMP, or are spares or repurposed vehicles that have been transferred between departments, such as the old ambulance that's now being used by the bridge crew. Housing asset replacement costs were determined using a combination of the 2021 BCAs where applicable and inflating by CPI for other assets such as appliances. It should be noted that this chart shows the number of housing units for each building type and then the number of assets for appliances, computers, and vehicles. Overall, 96% of county housing assets are in fair or better condition. This was as determined in the BCAs for building components and land improvements, and by using age-based data for appliances and other assets. Asset risk or criticality is the third aspect of levels of service and is a product of two variables: the probability that an asset will fail and the resulting consequence of that failure. The probability of failure is determined by considering factors such as condition, age, performance history, and exposure to extreme weather. The consequence of failure can be one of many types, including but not limited to direct financial, economic, socio-political, environmental, public health and safety, and strategic. Probabilities and consequences of failure can be assigned using a quantitative or qualitative measurement so that the risk of an individual asset can be calculated. This has been done using the risk frameworks and matrices, which can be found in the AMP. Now we'll move into the financial analysis portion. As previously mentioned, the overall replacement cost of all county assets as at 2021 is $1.63 billion. Using the recommended reinvestment rates as determined in the 2020 asset management strategy, the funding needed annually to sustain these assets is $37.2 million, but only $21.3 million is currently available. This leaves an annual deficit of $15.9 million. To overcome this annual deficit of $15.9 million, it would require an effective tax increase of 26.3%, which of course isn't feasible. So similar to what was recommended in the 2020 asset management strategy, it's recommended by staff that this increase be implemented over several years. Considering the improved data provided in the 2021 AMP, it's now recommended that tax revenues be increased by 1.57% over 15 years. In the 2020 strategy, it was recommended that tax revenues be increased by 1.21% over 15 years. In 2022, this equated to $754,348, and an increase from the Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund, or OSIF, was received, and this funding was utilized instead of levy dollars to fund the AM requirement. Compared to the 1.21% increase recommended in the county's 2020 strategy that was endorsed by council in 2021, the new rate of 1.57% would be a theoretical incremental increase of $228,600 based on the 2022 budget, had the 1.21% increase in funding be funded from levy for 2022. This 0.36% annual increase is reasonable given the more accurate replacement costs from the 2021 BCAs now being utilized for land improvement, building, and housing assets, the inclusion of the stormwater assets, as well as the recent increases in inflation. And with that, I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you very much, Amanda. Councillor Mill.
Thank you, Mr. Warden, and thank you, Amanda, for the report. If I heard you correctly, I think you said something to the effect that the road assets, as you presented them up there, may not be an accurate reflection of the road's condition. Notwithstanding the fact that some of the people that call me tell me in great detail what the condition of the road is and what it's doing to their vehicles, how do we get an accurate reflection of the condition of those roads up there? Please.
Just 1 second. Maybe Pat would have something to add to that. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Warden. The report that Trevor brought a couple of weeks ago, using the IRIS system to get kind of more accurate PCI ratings, that's pretty important to us. We also have an asset optimizer software that we're starting to work towards having a deterioration curve for every section of road that we own. So there's a reason, you know, there's a variety of factors on why the PCI ends up being what it is. But trying to get more accurate data is kind of our number one goal. So that's kind of what we're working on.
Is there anything you wanted to add, Amanda?
There we go. So I was just going to add that the part specifically that I was talking about that doesn't necessarily have a condition rating is the base of the road. So the part that's underneath the road. So we do have the PCIs for the surface, but it's hard to determine what the condition of the road underneath that is, the base. So we've used age-based condition rating. So if it's an old base that hasn't had to have any work done to it, right now it's generally showing as a poor condition rating, which may not be totally correct, but that's the best data we have.
Thank you, Councillor Soever, you're next.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Warden, and thank you for that report. Yes, we're looking quite far into the future here with the tax increases and the replacement costs. So are we just looking at our existing assets or assets we may need to acquire? Because obviously the Blue Mountains grew by 33% between the last two censuses, and I think Southgate 18, if I'm right, something like that. So obviously the county is going to have to acquire a lot more assets, particularly in, you know, arterial roads and stuff to move people between different parts of the county. So how do we factor into our asset management plan a projection of additional assets which we may acquire and obviously they will be acquired largely by DCs and things like that, but then we will start to have to maintain some of these assets almost immediately upon acquisition. So how do we factor in the growth in the assets?
So Amanda, I see Mary Lou has her hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. So the first piece on this is when we acquire a brand new asset, we're looking at the sources of funding at that time. So for example, with Rockwood Terrace, we're obviously going to be debenturing because of the cost factor. If we're looking at adding ambulances to the fleet because our call volume has increased, then we're going to be increasing the annual transfer to reserve in order to fund future replacements of those. So what the current asset management plan does is it looks at the assets we currently own and how much the replacement value is estimated at. And that plan is required to be refreshed at a minimum every 5 years. So as we acquire new assets, it's going to pick up the replacement value of those assets. And then at the time we are acquiring them, we're also looking at how we're going to fund them.
So so right now this is a minimum number then, because it's not got those adjustments that might come every 5 years then. So that's just, is that correct?
Yeah, so right now it's replacing our assets as they are, like for like, unless there's a definitive plan to replace it some different way, like the roll-off trucks, for instance, are factored in there.
Yeah. Randy seems to want to say something.
Randy?
Thank you, Mr. Wharton. And I guess just further in terms of new assets, especially of those that are driven by the need from growth and development, that's where the development charges and those capital assets that are going to be either required to be new assets or improved assets identified in our development charges background study that was just updated last year. Those are the projects and the assets that we'd be identifying, and that's where the collection of development charges to pay for those assets and those improvements through development charges is key. So I just wanted to note that in terms of how we be able to afford some of the capital requirements as it relates to growth and development.
Okay, thank you. Are you good to go, Councillor Swabber?
We become painfully aware in the Blue Mountains with our rapid growth that yes, the DCs pay for the acquisition, but then the asset management plan has to pay for the upkeep of these. So we're becoming extremely cautious, particularly with acquiring things like open space. You know, it's great you acquire the open space, but then all the ash trees die on it, and now somebody has to pay to cut those down. And you know, it's now town lands. So you know, I think when we look at these asset management plans and the cost here, I think, you know, acquiring them is easy with the DCs. And then once you assume the road, then it's on the tax base. So I think, you know, with rapid growth, it becomes extremely tricky to budget for that into the future. And I appreciate the work we're doing on the asset management plan. But we've seen that in the Blue Mountains as well, that, you know, projecting what costs you may have in the future when you acquire something is, you know, it's not easy.
Good point, Councillor Swabber. I see a lot of nodding heads. Next will be Councillor Milne, then Desai, and then I'll come to you, Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. And just to piggyback on Councillor Swabber's question, the opposite of acquiring the assets is the devolution of assets. And if Mr. Hoy ever gets around to the road rationalization and we give Road 1 back to Georgian Bluffs, that should relieve some of the pressure on the asset management plan.
Okay. Next will be Councillor Desai.
Thank you, Warden Hicks. I would like to draw council's attention to OREG 58817, section 2, or section 5, subsection 2, paragraphs 4 and 5. Paragraph 4 requires a full analysis of the full life cycle costs of the asset, the life cycle activities, a description of those. Section 5 is the important one. For municipalities with a population of less than 25,000, as reported by Statistics Canada in the most recent official census, the following: 1, description of assumptions regarding future changes in population or economic activity, and 2, how the assumptions referred to in paragraph or in subparagraph 1 relate to information required by paragraph 4. So the the regulation does go into significant detail on what to do with growth and how to expect growth. I also want to point out a recent study. It was January of 2020 by the Ontario Good Roads Association, showed that we have a roads and bridges deficit, infrastructure deficit across Ontario of $34.7 billion. Yet municipally, we remain hesitant to raise taxes to fund our infrastructure deficit. It could be political, it could be policy-based. I guess that is for me to debate, but I usually debate that at budget time. Effectively, by underfunding our asset management, Warden Hicks, we are leaving a large hill for the next generation to climb. It is high time that we take asset management seriously. It is high time that we stop relying on provincial governments. For example, under financial, there it is. Under the financial section of the financial analysis section of the report, there is the second last paragraph, which says, in 2022, the 1.21% tax levy increase equated to $754,348. Instead of an increase to the levy, an increase in the Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund was received and was allocated to this purpose. In my opinion, any increased funds that have been received that were unexpected should be used to further reduce the infrastructure gap, not just to do what we were going to do anyways. That if the province is going to step in, we need to step up as well. And it is frankly a little disappointing to see that we routinely just rely on Big Brother to come in and help us out instead of taking those steps. And I know these are unpopular decisions. I've advocated for these unpopular decisions for 8 years, and I've heard from various people at budget time every single time. But tough decisions need to be made, or else we can't call ourselves leaders, Warden Hicks. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Desai. Mary Lou, I don't know, I don't want to put you on the spot, but is there anything you want to add to that?
Councillor Desai is correct. It isn't an easy decision. There are many competing priorities. And the best we can do is, as staff, provide you with a number of options and recommendations. And ultimately, it's your choice as to what path you wish staff to go in. And we look at the 2023 budget. It won't be any easier. There'll be the same pressures, as well as a few additional ones. And you're right. We're not always going to have upper levels of government giving us funding. And the asset management plan is the best information, as Amanda said, that we have at this time. And, whether there's new technologies come about, whether there's assets we no longer require, the same as you have in your own municipalities. At Devolution, you had a number of community centers, and I'm sure many of you are reducing those. Or we may be adding assets based on added pressures from the community. So I don't envy you having to make that decision. And as staff, will present what we feel are the best options for you to consider.
Oops, sorry.
The other thing I just wanted to say is I'd like to thank Amanda for all the work she's done on this. People that haven't been involved have no idea how long this takes. And thank you to the asset owning departments that have worked so hard in giving Amanda the information that we need in order to fulfill this requirement. There was a county treasurer's call last week, and many are not at the stage we're at yet. They're going to be slightly delayed with their plans, and many municipalities don't have a dedicated resource. And it's being done on the side of the desk, or it's being done by a consultant. So those are, two important considerations as well. And the other thing I'd like to say is, as a result of all the work that's been done, Amanda had been asked to present next week at Public Sector Digest's user group on, how we've embarked on this journey and where we are since they presented their strategy to us. So I think that's an important recognition too.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Next is Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I too just want to congratulate Amanda and staff involved in putting together this asset management plan. I recognize the number of studies and data that it takes to assess and put together this plan, recognizing we're at the stage of the core assets and infrastructure asset management portfolio stage, and then how the impact of all of our assets is going to address our consideration for the new term of council for budget considerations, future strategy. So well done overall with the project. And there's a lot of thought that will go into how decisions will be made with regard to the assets. Really wanted to say that because asset management is so important. A couple of things I just want to ask is in terms of asset management, and I recognize that we have another deadline coming up July 1st, 2024. And I think that's when other assets of the county, such as forests or forestry and I guess secondary assets, if you will be addressed. So I just wanted confirmation on that. And also, does the economic environment of the province or of Grey County overall play into the assessment of this plan? And again, thank you.
Thank you. So yes, the plan for 2024 is to include everything that hasn't been included, which essentially, as you pointed out, is forests. Otherwise, we do have almost everything now in this plan, but we want to continue improving that data. Yeah, so that's a plan for 2024. And then as far as your second question, I've forgotten it.
Not a problem. Just wondering if there's consideration within the current asset management plan that we have before us that is incredibly detailed. Do you look at the effectively the state of the nation, where Ontario is economically now, and also Grey County? How far of a drill down takes place?
So yes, there is some data in here from the infrastructure report card that looks at all of Canada. And then we compare our reinvestment rates to everything else. And yeah, it's hard right now to look at inflation and figure out where that's going to go on a local or provincial level, obviously. So yes, we do try to factor it in and compare, but it's difficult for sure. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. And certainly we're just recognizing our global pandemic and how that factors into overall the strategy for paying for our assets and ensuring the functionality of them. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. I do not see any further hands. So if that's the case, it's perhaps time to call the question on the motion before us to receive and endorse the asset management plan. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Seeing none, that is carried. Your brief indulgence. Should we now go to all of this? Yeah. Thank you, Amanda. Okay, so we're going to go back to our delegation. I believe Savannah and Jen are going to make introductions, or is it just Savannah? Okay.
Good morning, County Council. really proud to be here with Jen today to introduce our delegation. We have Linda Alexander, who's the manager, and Sharon Bainham, the coordinator from YMCA Employment Services. We're here to celebrate and to share two really important programs that happened because of a number of partnerships that have been long lasting throughout the region. And 23 partners, actually, to tell you what the actual number is, which is really exciting. And a big piece of that is because of Jen. So she's going to talk a little bit about that. But what is most important to lay the groundwork for their presentation today is to talk about how these partnerships really impact the work that we do. The fact that we have these strong working relationships, we have the trust with our partners to know what we know and know what we don't, and be willing to all come together, pool our resources, pool our expertise. That's how we see things get done. And that's what this presentation today and these two programs are really about. It was understanding what the challenges are locally, what is going to work for the people who are participating in the program, and then not being nervous or afraid to say we need to do things differently. And that, thank goodness, is because of Jen and her amazing relationships with her table. So I'm going to pass it to her before we introduce our guest today.
Thanks, Savannah. This is such an exciting good news story, and so happy to share it. Just to give you a little bit of background and context, there are 19 long-term care homes in Grey Bruce. And for at least 3 decades, leaders from each of those homes, which cover a variety of either municipal operated, private, for-profit operated, or charitable long-term care homes, leaders from those homes have been getting together regularly to problem solve, collaborate, network, support each other, and had been doing so for at least 30 years. That increased significantly during the pandemic. And I think that part of our success broadly across Grey and Bruce County in long-term care has been from those partnerships and those partners coming together and really focusing on what's important, which is the health and safety of the people that live in long-term care and the people that work in long-term care, and very little focus on what part of long-term care we're from. So that's a little bit of the story about the long-term care homes and those leaders. The next part of the story is the health human resources challenges. And prior to the pandemic, this was very high on our radar. It was already a challenge, in ensuring that we were recruiting and retaining skilled, passionate individuals that were interested in working in long-term care. This has been a challenge. Of course, the pandemic shone a light on that and just further heightened the awareness of that challenge and the need to do some work. We'd been working together on some strategies, but we knew that we couldn't do this alone. The 19 long-term care homes, as great as our partnerships are and our relationships are, we couldn't do this alone. And that's where we're so excited to be talking about this partnership. This collaboration of working with the YMCA Employment Services, Georgian College, Economic Development, the 19 long-term care homes is truly innovative, collaborative, and truly a homegrown strategy to problem solve locally, making impact right here in Grey Bruce. And I'm so grateful to each of those partners in coming together to celebrate this story. And I know lots of opportunities as we move along. So I'm really pleased to introduce Linda and Sharon to tell us more about it. And so sit back and enjoy.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for allowing us to be here today. And I do want to say thank you to all of you. It's been a while since I've been in council, and I begin to appreciate the dedication of you as councillors and representing your communities, as well as the staff. And so thank you very much for that. So I just want to go to keep going through this slide. So we've always had a working relationship, or a strong working relationship, with economic development. The YMCA Employment Services has been around for a while. Economic development, we've begun to work more closely in the last few years. And of course, Georgian College, we've had a lot of activities over the years in terms of us connecting. So with the need for long-term care and for the employees, that long-term care committee had already done some of the legwork. They had contacted George and said, let's do some of this training, but things didn't kind of move forward until actually Savannah pulled us all together with economic development and the connections that we built. And so today we're going to tell you about that story and the results of it. And so Sharon and I are going to present kind of some information. So the YMCA, our strength is program delivery. And that's not just working with frontline individuals and clients to get them into jobs and employers to make those matches. It's also about putting that all that work in the background. We have a lot of reporting, a lot of experience with that kind of side of the funding that will help move things forward. And you don't have to relearn it as other organizations. Georgian College was a key to providing the essential skills that are required in this field. And they actually tailored the program based on the input from the long-term care facilities and that group. The Adult Learning Center was also involved because there are some individuals who are great workers, but may not have that education. And so they were there to support the learners, and they were also key to the pre-employment segment. And I know we had one learner who was struggling, but we sent back to the Adult Learning Center. They got the support they needed, and we were able to move them forward with the actual training. The Grey Bruce long-term care, residential care employers were the ones that guided the project from start to finish. We met with them regularly. We asked them for input. Some of the things we had to adjust as we went along. We started this in a pandemic and delivered it in a pandemic and came out of it in the pandemic. Kind of, I'm hoping we're out of it anyway. And so they've been key resources all along. There were certain junctions where we had to say, do we really need this? Can we change this around? Will that make a difference? We need to get some placements in there for the people that are trained. Who do we connect with? How do we get that going? So they were really key from start to finish. And as I said, economic development was kind of the glue that brought us all together. And they were also key in terms of the Sydenham campus. That was our home base. We used it with physical distancing to bring the participants in for the in-person requirements of training. It's also been the home base for the staff and a safe place and a comfortable place for our learners to come and use the Wi-Fi or get the support they need as they go through the training. So really, the collaboration has been kind of a key thing in this whole process. Our funding is from the Ministry of Labour, Training and Skills Development. That's who funds our Employment Ontario funding. And the program that helped with the essential skills was the Skills Advance Ontario projects. That project has kind of wound down, and I'll talk about that in just a second. The goal of the Skills Advance Ontario is to assist job seekers to learn sector-specific essential technical and soft skills to assist them in finding a career. And in our project, it was healthcare. It can be a number of projects that are priority. We didn't have a lot of funding. I mean, compared to some of the dollars you guys are dealing with, our SAO project is pretty lean. And compared to other projects across the province, we are lean. The Y is known for being efficient and trying to be effective in all that we do. And so that bears out to all of this. So our Skilled Advance Ontario grant was about 702,000, and our PSW program, which just started in May, is about 788. And the increase is due to the higher cost of tuition because there's more actual training that is part of that program. So in terms of why do the training at all, we wouldn't have taken this on if it wasn't for the need that was in the community and for the fact that it was brought forward to us as this is what's needed in our long-term care. We are desperate to train these individuals who are coming in and helping out during the pandemic, but don't have the formal training. So it was the cry for assistance. We looked at it and said, you know, there's this grant. Why don't we try applying for it? And that's where we are today. Many of the entry-level staff that were hired during that period had no prior experience. And in fact, you probably all saw the job ads. They were pretty basic because we needed people in there. So it was really key though. And I know Jennifer was always on top of, we need to have these individuals trained to make it a meaningful experience for them and to really to be able to help out. And so it was that input that brought us together, and we were able to support some of that long-term care employment needs during that time frame. So I'll let Sharon talk about the results, because I do have to say programs and projects only work there's good people leading them. And Sharon is one of those good people who is dedicated and experienced in employment service delivery. And so she's our workforce development coordinator, and I'd like her to speak to some of the results.
Thank you. So hello, everyone, and thank you for letting us come and present to you today. So I have put the numbers on the board. I'm not actually going to just go through them all individually, but we were funded for 100 individuals to do this training. And as you can see by the numbers, we actually overachieved. So we actually were able to take more people into the training than we anticipated. Not everybody did every aspect, so we were able to offer training to extras. So we actually had 65 incumbents going through the training, and we had 41 new hires going through the training. So an incumbent is somebody who actually already works in long-term care. And like Linda said, they were the ones who were hired in the pandemic. They had no formal training. And then it was thought it was a good idea to actually provide them with some training. So they were actually referred to us by their employers. So their employers chose the people they wanted to get trained, and they actually forwarded their names to us. So, and then we helped them go through the training. So that in itself, they actually continued to work while they were doing this training. So they were doing both things at once. So hats off to any of those that actually managed to do that, because they were not just working in a career where they had a set number of hours per week. They were working in a career where somebody could call them at the last minute and say, come to work, please, we're desperate. So they were trying to maneuver through all that as well as doing this training as well. So they did a really, really good job with that. And then we also did 41 new hires. So those were people who were either not working or not working in healthcare. So they came to us, they had no prior experience. They probably, some of them weren't even sure whether it was actually what they wanted to do. But for those, we actually gave them 2 weeks of pre-employment training. So that meant that some of it was online, depending on where we were in the pandemic situation. And some of it was actually in person. So we provided them with some pre-employment training that included soft skills. And then we also did the pre-Georgian College training included in that as well. So they knew how to get online and actually do their Georgian College training. Then they completed their Georgian College training, and then they went on and we put them all in a placement with a healthcare facility. So either retirement or into a long-term care facility. So, and through that placement, we supported them. Some were not successful in their first placements. We found them a second one, which was more suitable. So they actually managed to get their step in the door. And the most significant thing about this is 32 out of those 41 are actually still working in healthcare. So they stayed with it, that they decided that was what they wanted to do. They've chosen their career now. So that is actually where they are staying. So I just posted a couple of slides of some of our graduates and their quotes. So this is one of our incumbents. He was actually already working in long-term care. And he was happy to, once he completed the training, to actually give us a quote. And he actually was one of the ones who said he actually found it, I think, fairly easy to do the training. Some struggled a little bit more with the actual online aspect of the training. But he actually found it very, very beneficial. And even though it was online training, he said it taught practical skills, which was the most important thing. And as Linda said, it was tailored towards our people. So they knew they needed those practical skills that were going to help them while they were actually at work. And this is one of our new hire graduates. Again, she had never worked in healthcare. She was actually currently not working when she came to us. She is an immigrant, and English is not her first language. So she wasn't 100% certain whether the online schooling was going to be the way forward for her. But she actually, again, turned out to be one of our superstars. She completed all the training. We put her in a placement in a retirement home. And then after that, she decided that she had enough confidence then to apply to be a PSW. She enrolled as a PSW, and she's now working as a qualified PSW in long-term care. So she is definitely staying in healthcare. It's her chosen career now. So she's moving forward. And then continuing on from that, the next step is actually to go on to PSW training. So the positions that we were training were the entry-level positions. The PSWs are the next step upwards. So we wanted to do PSW training. The idea being that we actually, there's still a big need in healthcare in all positions. But PSW is the one that we keep hearing. We need PSWs, we need PSWs. So the need is still there. But there's a few things we learned from the ESSC training. One was that a lot of people can't afford to quit work to go back to school. So what we wanted to do was provide part-time training so they could work part-time, take PSW training, get where they needed to be, stick with their careers and not have to quit work to do it. So moving on to our PSW training, we created a part-time training for those people. We also found that the ESSC training gave people who didn't think they could do college work the confidence to do it. So there are people who probably would never have actually submitted their names to Georgian College. And they did, because they had now completed the ESSC training. They completed it successfully. They were able to maneuver through the program, and they felt that actually now they can do PSW training. And a lot of them would not, and a lot of the feedback we've got, we took a lot of feedback from our clients. We wanted to make sure we were doing the right thing. But a lot of the feedback is they wouldn't have succeeded without our support. So we gave them full wraparound supports. They had a place to come. We provided them with internet, with laptops, anything they needed to try and help their training, we tried to provide for them. And a lot of them have said they wouldn't have completed without that support. So that's why we also wanted to do the PSW training, because we know a lot of PSW programs aren't that successful. So we wanted to make sure we were there to be that wraparound support for them. So we have now acquired funding for 44 trainees, which is a mixture of part-time training and full-time training. And the full-time trainees will again, and the new hire trainings will get the pre-employment training as well. So we will give them that full, just to make sure it's what they really want to do. They get orientations into long-term care homes, and they actually get to see what it's all about before they make the final commitment. And then of those trainees that we've already put through, we've got 15 that actually completed our micro certification, that are actually taking the part-time training. And then we've also now just had another 3 that have decided to take the full-time training with us. So we've got 18 from our last group who are actually moving forward into PSW training. So that's a success. Oops, wrong one. Okay, so back over to Linda.
Yes, and we weren't going to take on any more training until we went back to our long-term care partners. And I think it was December, and said, okay, we've got 80% of our ESSC clients in place. And we know it's working. Okay, we'll put in another application. We very quickly, as partners, got together, did the grant application. I think we submitted it December 23rd, and we found out in February that we started negotiating the contract for this one. So again, without that partnership, without me being able to message Jen or Savannah at the last minute saying, I need more of this, where's this? It wouldn't have happened. So that's really where we reflected on the successes when we looked at doing this presentation. Each of us as an individual organization, we all listen and engage with our clients and participants. We also have strong, trusted relationships, and that's really important. And we each have our own pool of expertise. And so when we got together, we can do this, especially when we have the funder there who's saying, here's workforce solution funding. Now it's skills development fund. SAO has gone by the wayside. It's now skills development fund, slightly different flavor, but still works. And we have Sydenham campus where we can use as a hub, as a home for this training. And then we have the employers and the trainees who are the key to this. But none of us would have been able to do this individually at all. And so we would just want to finish with that comment, is together we're better. We all have our strengths, we all have our skills, we all have something to bring to the table to make a real solution. And frankly, if you heard me talk before, some of you have, I don't take anything on unless it's going to be a need in the community and it's going to make a difference. So thank you, and we'd be happy to answer any questions if there is any.
Well, thank you very much, Linda, and thank you, Sharon. And I can hear the passion in your presentation. It sure comes across. And what you're doing is so critical. If council would allow, maybe I'm asking a silly question here, but what is the difference between a PSW and an ESW?
Thank you. Good question. Thank you, Warden Hicks. So PSW is a personal support worker, which it has been traditionally the role of providing hands-on direct care support in long-term care. And prior to the pandemic, there was already recognition of challenges of working short-staffed and how do we support those gaps and how do we encourage people to enter into the long-term care field. And then the pandemic just really accelerated that. So an ESW, there's a few different names. That is emergency support worker. It's also, sometimes that position is called resident support assistant. Sometimes it's called care support aide or care support assistant. And so it's essentially a role of someone who is coming in off the street saying, I will provide some support. We created job descriptions and tasks that are not at the skill level of a personal support worker, but help to add an extra set of hands and was extremely critical in our success during the pandemic. And I just, if I can have a second to just highlight something that Sharon said is, so these individuals that came in as CSAs or emergency support workers, they put their hand up at probably the most frightening time of the pandemic and said, we see that there's a need, we'll go there and help you. And then with the partnership that's been described today, Sharon and Linda and their teams were able to nurture and support them. And Georgian College and Sydenham were able to give them the skills so that they had a foundation of comfort and understanding of the work that needs to happen in long-term care. But the courage of those individuals to put their hand up and say, I've never even been in a long-term care home, but I can see you need help. And they show up at the door has just been awesome. And so that's the emergency support worker.
Thank you for that, Jen. Sorry. Okay. Is there anyone else with a question, council? Okay, Kim, you're on.
Thanks, Mr. Warden. And I just want to acknowledge all of you dealing with a new program and with what I would call a non-traditional population of learners. Each one of you had to put yourself out there and solve problems, individual and specific problems in order to make this happen. I think we all learned a lot from going through that. But again, if you hadn't been willing to be on the end of the phone or at the end of the email and talking to each other and to the students themselves to ensure that they got what they needed, we wouldn't be where we are today. So I wanted to say thank you to you because you took those small little things that were going to be deal breakers for people and you resolved them. And that's what made the difference here. So thank you for all of that.
Okay, I do not see any other hands. So with that said, I'll thank you, Sharon, and thank you, Linda. And thank you, Jen and Savannah as well. Okay, council, we are now at 11:23. I'm going to suggest that we take a break to 11:40, if that's okay with everyone. Good break. And we'll come back. And I believe that Pat is on deck when we come back, right? Okay, so 11:40 sharp. Okay, we are back. We're dealing with item 6B now, the Transportation Organizational Review. I need a mover and a seconder to put the item on the floor. So your hand is up indeed. Okay, moved by Councillor Hutchison, seconded by Councillor Psw. Pat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. First, I'd like to introduce Deanna Veltri. She is in on this meeting to answer some questions. So she is our consultant from Strategy Corp. And I'll get more into the work that Strategy Corp did for us. But coming from someone who is maybe notoriously difficult with consultants and hard on them, we are very happy with the work Deanna and her team did. So just you'll see in some of the report, and those of you who looked at the links, just an excellent job she did. I'll get more into all the stuff she completed for us later. Just one little housekeeping issue I just wanted to mention. So Strategy Corp has in their report, you'll see they have certain names for certain positions. So we've kind of modified that to our report. So there's some crossover where positions will have different names. Basically the same tasks assigned, but we just kind of ended up naming some of the positions a different names. So you might find that throughout the report. Okay, so the first question that comes to mind in the executive summary, we answered it a few places, is why are we doing this now? We haven't gone out to look at our organization transportation since I think we went out in 2010 and it was completed in 2011. So a lot has changed in those years. For example, like even around this horseshoe, there was 3 councillors that are still here from back then. And one of them, I'm not going to say who it is, one of them in particular has aged horribly. So it's a long time, right? It's over a decade. So so even with the public works staff, you think of the public works staff, there's not that many folks around from back then, and the industry has changed so much. Even just the growth in the area, as Councillor mentions quite frequently, our traffic alone, we see about 3% a year growth typically in traffic. So that translates to about 40% increase in traffic over that time, with a corresponding 40% growth in complaints, probably a 40% growth in permits. We have more permits now than we did then. And in a lot of situations, new residents to the area might call us more than people that have been here for 30 years. So it's probably more than a 40% increase in work for our staff. A couple other reasons, we have some senior staff that have announced their upcoming retirements in a year or a year and a half. So we wanted to kind of get ahead of the curve and do some knowledge transfer, which it just pays huge dividends. There's nothing worse than someone trying to learn the job on the job. And just the change in the workforce of the difficulties in recruiting qualified staff. There aren't the people there were years ago. We used to have 15 or 18, 25 guys on the seasonal list working call-in hours, ready to come in, maybe construction guys that didn't work in the winter or farmers that didn't work in the winter. Well, those people are working all year round now, or there's not as many of them, or it's just everyone's having a hard time hiring people. So we really need to address those issues as well. As I said about the permits, just way more stuff going on than there ever was before. And just increased asset management. So I think back to, when I started and the 5-year capital plan was 1 page. It didn't have all the paving jobs on it. And the same with the member municipalities, like everyone has these thorough plans now for construction. Things take longer. The EAs are a little longer. There's more consultation. It just all turned into extra time. So, and even just county groups were on, like climate change committee, there's cycling committees were on, there's regional road safety groups. That stuff just takes a lot of time. We've basically been getting by for 10 years without any increase in staff. Because I think I look at our team and most of us are from a consultant or a contractor kind of background. So you kind of just make do with the staff you have. And if some things don't get done, as long as it's not a risk to the public, we haven't come back here asking for a bunch more people, but ultimately that does affect the level of service that we can provide. and I'm going to mention it as we go here, but there's quite a few projects that haven't really progressed the way they should. So I'll talk about those later. So we had hired Strategy Corp September 24th. And on page 22 of the report, you'll see all the goals of the study. So we started a project team with Randy Schertzer and Jen Moreau and myself. And Kim was in quite a few of the meetings with us, of course. And we met every week. And again, I'll give thumbs up to Strategy Corp. They scheduled a half-hour meeting every week that they never once missed. So it just kind of kept our eye on the ball, and we didn't fall behind. And every week there was things that we were expected to get done, whether it was gathering data about our employees or our staff or our work or our budgets. And so it really kept us, Deanna really kept us moving forward. So, and then for her to learn our business, she did a lot of solo interviews with people. She did with groups like our area supervisors, our staff. We did online surveys, talked to other directors, talked to other departments, other municipalities, and really kind of learned the industry, what she didn't know already. So, so the result of the study, Tara, if we could go to the org chart. So before you get completely scared by this new org chart, we are not asking to hire 8 people today. But I think it just proved what we kind of already suspected, in that we probably have been getting by with a pretty low ratio of staff, looking at what our budget is and how much work we have to get done. So on this page here, you'll see the light blue are basically the jobs that were already existing. The orange are jobs that we had budgeted for, but we didn't fill. So when we decided we were going to take a look at our organization again, we had one empty position, and then it became 2 empty positions, but we didn't want to fill them just in case. We wanted to look at all the jobs again. So we didn't want to start a new person and then realize, actually, that really wasn't the job that we wanted it to be. We'd like to do these other tasks. So, I mean, one of those people, is doing good work in Chatsworth now. So we still had never filled his position when he left. So the basically and the red positions there, as you can see, they're quite high on the seniority, in our organization. They are the upcoming retirements. So big changes coming. Some people probably like to see the top one in red too, but anyway, so it's important for us to really get those positions filled with competent staff. So so the largest single change, and it was, if you read the Strategy Corp report, you'll see some of their options they provided. It was the addition on the right here of the administration department division, I guess we'll call it. So we always had engineering and maintenance. Maintenance we're now going to call operations, just to be more in line with other municipalities. But the problem is there's so many tasks. Maintenance is doing all the plowing, all the tree cutting, all that, bridge work. And engineering is putting out those, $17 million a year construction projects and design and EAs and all those things. So the bigger projects really just were hard to get to. They seem to sort of fall off the radar a little bit, because you're just working at it off the side of your desk. And I mean, they are progressing, but they probably don't progress as well as we'd like. I know Councillor Milligan mentioned the road exchange program, all that stuff from the master plan that we just don't get to. The town line bridges, for example, like the speed cameras, like they're big projects, and really it's for the public. It will affect our organization and how we run and what our assets are, and not doing it because you don't have enough resources, because a lot of it's not, you can't just tender it out. It's just not that type of work that we tend to fall behind on. So it's really important that we have enough manpower to tackle this work. But the one thing we wanted to make sure is we did a phased approach, because this is just a kind of a plan, but you're not going to hire all of them at once. We're going to phase and hire them and see, maybe one of the jobs changes slightly. Maybe you don't need as many people as are on this diagram. So we would be coming back to get permission and have budget to increase our complement. So with that arm on the right there, the administration, the most important position is the manager of administration. So that person, their job is to oversee and maintain the internal operations and to collaborate with other managers to complete these strategic needs. So we need someone who understands our business, brings staff together, carries on relationships with our stakeholders, and really increase our communication with the public. That's a big one. Our communications department, Rob Hatton, do a wonderful job, but it's not their job to necessarily decide what our message is. They do a wonderful job when we tell them what we want out there. But nowadays, we just need to do a better job at our public communication than we do. So we're looking for a person that's going to be a worker, not a delegator, someone kind of a closer who can get stuff done. So that's a very important position that we want to fill this year, because we've always struggled on those large scope projects for the last number of years anyway. And one of the things that person will likely be doing will be helping to create an urban road and road exchange task force. So, in the past, when we had a road rationalization and a road got uploaded to the county, for example, we really took it with no money. But with asset management, to take on, in some cases, the roads needed a lot of work. We just feel like we don't want to hinder ourselves and to the detriment of every other road we have by taking on these new roads that maybe someone doesn't really want anymore. So, it seems easy on a map. You say, oh, you take that road, we'll take this road, and you take that road, we'll take this road. But when you start thinking of the money, being that you're underfunded, we're underfunded, we have to share in the, underfundedness or whatever the word would be. But we have to agree, right? So, if you're MTO, you just download it. Who cares what the person says? We're not like that, right? You all have municipalities and taxpayers that you're in charge of, and we need to come to an agreement on how our road system's going to look. Everyone's had issues over the years saying, Hanover, for example, has mentioned many times they would be very happy to be in charge of more of their county roads. I don't know if they know they're going to get a bridge out of the deal, though, or two, maybe two. So anyway, we're really looking for that manager administration to really start bringing some of these projects forward and work with our other admin staff to just coordinate a little better. Another position, the maintenance manager, who is now going to be the operations manager, has never really had a backup. We had Trevor, who was here a couple of weeks ago. He did that job just acting for a while, kind of as Graham's backup. But in general, the backup for the maintenance manager has been the area foreman. Well, they have their own patrol to take care of, right? They're the area supervisors now. So, and they know their own patrol very well, but they don't really know the other ones maybe as well. So it was always hard to, when that person was off or on vacation, who's answering, right? I mean, there's an admin assistant there, but it's kind of a lot of pressure on that person who may or may not want to do that. So we wanted to create the senior supervisor. Now we've already budgeted for the operations management technologist there at the bottom, but that's kind of a lower level position. Like that person goes out and looks at culverts and looks at drainage issues and really helps kind of a technical expert for maintenance. But we thought it was important to hire the senior supervisor first. And that is going to be, that person we're planning would be Jim Nichols' replacement when Jim retires. So we'd have a full year here, approximately, to go over a full winter season, full summer, managing the crews, evaluating the crews, seeing how they work, right? Sometimes we're so busy, you don't get out to look at the crews that much. Our guys are excellent, but maybe there's another way we can run it that we don't always know. So that's another position that we want to fill immediately. And the third one is just an intermediate engineering technologist, which is the orange in the engineering department there. So that was budgeted for. We've actually already posted it. So there's interviews on Monday. So we find even with the development charges, we finally are going to take on a little more of the platform widening, which is really nice. We have a little more money to do that. But they're a lot of work. Like a pulverize and pave is one thing, But when you're getting into digging out a road in its entirety, widening it, there's a little more environmental things going on. The design is much more complicated. The scheduling is more complicated. Like I said, a lot of the money is coming from development charges, but we really need that additional designer. And we've had very good luck. We don't use consultants that much. We do most of our own design work, which not every municipality is like that, but our team is really good. We put out a lot of tenders. We usually get very good prices. We're one of the first ones out typically. We get a lot of compliments from our contractors that the tenders are clear and easy to read. We don't often get in a big fight about, things in the tender that we can't agree. We think we're pretty clear cut. There's the odd one, of course, but in general, they do really good work and we get excellent value for money. And I don't like all these guys were consultants mostly, right? We all know what our charge out rates were when we were consultants. Now, none of us were making that money. It was going to, the owner of whoever company you worked for or somebody, an accountant, I don't know who got the money. But we know what our charge out rates were, and we're working for a very small percentage of that now, doing the same work. So, and the other thing I just wanted to mention, so those are the 3 positions we're looking for this year. And there's a chart in the report that I'll get to in a bit too. The other thing that I'd be remiss not to mention our field staff. So, and Deanna and her group had noticed this. The field staff is really, they're incredibly busy. And they are your person, they're the key to the organization in my mind. They're vital. They're the person out plowing your road at 3 a.m. They're working on a bridge on the hottest day of the year. They're the mechanics working on the ambulances. Those guys are the ones doing all the work. They're keeping the public safe and, making sure that the roads are nice to drive on and making sure that they're not doing damage to your car and there's no risk to the public safety. And we don't really have enough. We feel we don't really have enough guys in the patrols. When one of them is off, and they work a lot of loo time too. So when one of them is off, we really struggle with having enough guys to do the work because we really don't want them to take vacations in the winter. And they accommodate us generally with that because we want them plowing. But then we don't want them to take vacation in the summer either because we're busy. So, and November, it's hunting week, they like to take it then. But it's really important for us to have those extra people because all of a sudden something comes up and you got one guy in the patrol. It's hard to do a lot with one guy. Now I'll give some thanks to CUPE. We hired 3 students this summer and we had to get that through our last negotiation. But the students are doing some very good work, an extra person to flag, an extra person to help go put up signs, do that kind of thing. So they've been a really good resource for us. So as I said, we're short of workers, but we didn't really want to go too much into it because it's not just about throwing extra bodies or resources at a problem. There's other things. We have our shifts in the collective agreement, for example. So we just can't make up a shift and put a guy on it. And there's not a lot of point in putting more guys on the shifts we already have covered. So we started a working group with the union to try to come up with how we're going to maybe, and another report will come back about this, but how we're going to increase their numbers in the patrol. And the other thing that's lying out there is we're getting 2 routes back from Walkers, the 2 routes in Georgian Bluffs. So we will be doing those routes ourselves. You've seen it maybe in the capital for buying some more plows. And then we're going to need people to man those routes as well. So the other thing on page 27 of the report, it lists 21 other recommendations that Deanna and her team came up with. And some of them are already being done. There's some in there with other departments, things HR is going to do, and some of them we're already working on. But it's kind of a roadmap for us, kind of our marching orders a little bit that we're going to continue to work on. So a lot of good stuff here on, some short term, some medium, some long term. Some of them are, not a lot of work with a kind of a quick win, low hanging fruit thing. And other ones are going to be a lot of work. But it's just, it's nice to have, a list of 21 things that we know we can keep working forward. And these will be incorporated into our work plans moving forward. So the other thing, just the budget page, Tara. The financial page. So because we budgeted for 2 positions this year, and the year is, by the time we get people hired, it's, getting over halfway here. We're actually in a surplus for hiring the 3 positions this year. But then next year, when we have to budget for the 2 new positions again, and we'd like to fill that 3rd technical operations management technologist next year. So at the bottom, you'll see the summary that it's going to be more money in 2023, which we'll be putting in our budget when it comes back through this committee. So, more guys getting more work done, and then we're going to incorporate our field staff, of course, too, and come back with a report on that. But picking up our level of service, getting all these reports done, really getting these initiatives completed, because they're just languishing too long. It's not going to be free, right? So, but for this year, it's pretty good, and next year it's not too bad. So the other positions you'll see at the bottom there for future. So there was another, like an engineering tech would be working in the field with the construction. We have a union person that does that now. That being said, he's going to retire at some point. So whether that stays there or we create a new job in the office, kind of construction focused. We've talked about traffic engineers and analysts. And I've had calls from various people about things like our traffic signals. Generally, they're sort of complaint based. We don't spend a lot of time because we just don't have the manpower to go out and really analyze how these signals are doing. Someone calls and says, and I know Councillor O'Leary has called me many times and will say, the left arrow advance is signaling when there's nobody there. And there'll be a wire busted on the loop or something. But really, it shouldn't take a call from somebody for us to know that. It'd be nice to, to have more time to go out and really check these to make sure they're working well. The other thing, project lead, transportation projects and strategy. So that would be in the administrative wing. And we didn't fill that position yet because we're going to see how it goes with our new administration manager. And then there's some admin coordinator positions, and there was a GIS person as well, which I missed, which we kind of have to work with GIS on how that's going to look, because we find GIS is really increasing in needs, especially with our asset management software being GIS based. So we're just looking to continue on, adopt this report, and like I said, thanks Strategy Corp again for all the work they've done, and move forward.
Thank you very much, Pat. Deanna, I saw you nodding your head a whole lot. Is there anything that you wanted to add before I go to questions?
No, I think you're absolute. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
You can hear me. Okay. You never know in this new world. Thank you. And thank you, Pat, for all your kind words. No, absolutely. He covered it very, very well, really reflective of all the work we've done together. So happy to move forward to questions.
Thank you. Council, is there any questions? Councillor Milne.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. And I know Pat said that his first reports were single pages. Now I know they were not chiseled on a stone tablet, but they might have been parchment. That said, this is a great report. There's been a lot of material covered there, and it's actually a testament to the abilities of the staff they have and have had, that they've managed to do the job they've done up to this point. But I look forward to a lot of these missions being filled in the future to continue the good work that you're doing. Now, that said, also, as I said earlier, I do have people tell me in great detail what's wrong with our roads. So I look forward to sharing those with you and getting our roads into better shape, some of them, in the future.
Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. And I just want to say, Pat, this is an excellent report, and I really appreciate all of the study that went into this in terms of having your department current and future ready. Certainly with all the asset management discussion we had earlier, and factoring in all the engineering studies, including bridge assessments and road work assessments. I really understand the magnitude of the work that's being done in order to keep the the health and safety and the quality of life for Grey County residents in place. So I wondered, so thank you very, very much for this. So wondering this report, and I was trying to go over it again. How many years do you think that this report will cover off in terms of having your department retaining its modern and future ready approach, recognizing you always do that, and well done. But will this take us 10 years or 20 years into the future? Just wondering that for consideration. Thanks.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good question. That's a tough one. I mean, everything's changing so quickly, right? I think as much as anything, it's kind of sets us up with sort of a structure to better assess what we do need. There, even in doing some studies for things like this, you look at stuff like overtime hours, right? How many overtime hours our staff works. But sometimes we don't have the administration staff to realize why exactly are they working that much overtime? Are you short of people? Is it just weather based? Maybe is it some other factor that you're not sure of, right? So I think for the short term, the next 5 years or so, we'll kind of proceed with this, but it could change too. If all these road rationalization gets done, maybe we don't have as many urban roads to work on. Maybe having someone who's an expert signals isn't as big a priority for us, right? So I think it's kind of a structure that'll help us move forward as much as anything.
Councillor Silver.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Warden, and thank you, Pat, for this report. And certainly the technology is changing, and following up on Councillor Robinson's question here. I know fiber. We've talked a lot about fiber in county roads, and it's been mentioned that there's no expertise within the roads department, and I'm just wondering with driverless cars may be coming in the future, the need for a lot of fiber and things, well, I guess it's up to council to direct whether the information highway becomes part of the roads department as well, and not just the regular highway. So I think that's something that we probably should consider in that. And on the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, that project lead, that's is that person kind of like a manager of capital projects?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Warden. It was kind of more a special projects kind of thing. So again, we're going to see how it goes with the administration manager. That could even be a job for someone who's retiring. They're still in the organization. They've got some special projects to take care of. That they better get done before they leave, right? So that's kind of what that job is, kind of these special projects that are kind of, or something like right now, if that might be the patrol depot that we're all kind of doing off the side of our desk. Those kind of things that, special projects don't really go away. It doesn't seem like there's always something that's kind of not really directly in your wheelhouse.
Oops. Sorry.
Yes, and because what we found in the Blue Mountains is now we have a manager of capital projects, and these projects, like you say, they were being done off the side of the desk, and now that we have a dedicated person, we're actually seeing big savings in capital projects because that person is identifying areas where savings could be had where they may not have been noticed before because a person is doing that off the side of their desk. So I think it's good. I think the need for additional staff, it looks like it's a big budget item, but it's pretty hard to measure how much you've saved on capital projects. All of a sudden, you have somebody that's dedicated to a special project, and even in the design stage, the estimate comes back and it's a few $100,000 less than it would have been if you would have let the consultant go wild on it. So I think your department's doing a great job, and certainly this kind of support. We always look at the cost of these things, but it does produce savings in the long run. It's having a dedicated person looking at a special project, I think sometimes saves more money than, well, hopefully it does, because that's why he's there. Thank you.
Thank you. And I gotta say, Pat, every time you speak, Deanna's head goes up and down, so I can tell that the two of you are completely aligned. I have a question, if council would allow. On page 5, you have a line in the middle of the page that says further financial and operational analysis, as well as consultation with the union, will be undertaken in the near future. The further, at the beginning of that sentence suggests that there's been some consultation already. Are you able to speak about that?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Warden. Yeah, this kind of came up with the union at our labor management as well. They have some of the same issues with our manpower that we do. For example, it used to be you had your whatever 7 guys in the patrol, say, and they were there. That was kind of their job. Well, now people, and we used to have a rule you had to live within, I think it was 30 kilometers of the patrol. We can't really be that picky anymore. People aren't dying to come here like maybe they were 20 years ago. Not that it's not a bad place to work. I don't mean that, but it's just that the workforce isn't what it used to be. So we want to work with the union. They've agreed to work with us. So they, like, for example, there's 2 guys in Patrol B that are stationed in Patrol B, but in the winter, they take a job in a different patrol plowing because everyone seems like the senior guys like plowing more than patrolling. They seem to really enjoy the plowing. So, and there's more overtime in plowing, right? So in the winter, they're plowing in a different patrol. And in the summer, they're on a different crew. Like they'll be inspectors or on the tree crew or, so there's 2 guys that have full-time jobs in B. They're literally almost never there. And the union's not loving that. I mean, like you want your guys and it's just kind of the way it's worked out, but it's one of the things we need to work on with the union.
Thank you, Councillor Desai.
Thank you, Warden Hicks. Given that it is 12:15, I believe my colleagues opposite would be upset if I didn't bring up lunch at least once. And I think Scott would be upset if I didn't point out to Pat that he was standing between lunch and us. But the question I have, Warden Hicks, is, well, Pat alluded to it. He said people aren't dying to come up here, which I guess is Savannah's next project. But do we have a strategy? Like, we're saying that we need more people, which is true for most municipalities. Do we have a strategy on how we're going to fill these positions? Because I know the private sector pays more. No one calls you and says your roads are terrible in the private sector. So what are we trying to sell as a product, to entice people to come work for Grey County? What's the proposal or the value proposal there?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Warden. We've made a lot of changes already. Like I said, the fact that we ever had people that would be 10 years on a seasonal list working without a real full-time job, they were getting full-time hours, but they didn't have full-time status. That's pretty much done now. We don't have anybody on our seasonal list now. We've gotten to the point where we're hiring people full-time if we can get them. So that's a big thing. And from my point of view, even being a former private sector guy myself, there's a lot of perks to working in the public side. There's a lot of courses, there's a lot of training, a lot of experience. And then you always seem to, you're kind of able to kind of be on the cutting edge of some certain things too, right? There might be more pilot projects than there would be if you're in the private sector. And even like, so I look at our engineering guys. If you're in the private sector and there's one thing you can do well, that's all you're doing. Like, you're not doing anything else. You're just, if you have one kind of thing you can draft, that's all you're drafting, right? They're just trying to get things done as quickly as possible for money. So I think just worrying about and thinking about our employees' wellness is big. I mean, we do way more wellness than we ever did. We're worried about the career. HR is kind of going down the road of starting to map out courses for these people. Like, we have got a lot of certified road supers now. We hardly had any when I started. We're willing to pay for those courses. It's to our benefit, obviously. So I think we've done a fairly decent job of getting people, but the main thing is
People want full-time. So.
Go ahead, Randy.
Thanks for that. And just to build on what Pat indicated too, some of the recommendations, those 21 recommendations that are in the report, there's some that are specific to, just enhancing that relationship between management and field staff and other things. So I think, Pat's indicated some already great things that are underway, and we want to build on those opportunities and have further, opportunities for two-way communication between management and field staff, just to make sure that, if there's some ideas that the field staff have to make the processes more efficient, making sure we provide those opportunities. And so there's a few recommendations in those 21s that I think will also build and enhance on some of the great stuff that Pat already had highlighted that's already underway or it's already in place.
Very good. Thank you. I do not see any other hands. So, oh, sorry, Councillor Body, my apologies.
Thank you, Warden Hicks. I hear I demoted you last time down to our level in air. I'm find it fascinating, and I guess this is a good times report. I'm surprised number 22 isn't rationalizing what we're doing, simplifying, doing less. We around the table love to make promises to people, and we keep doing more and more and more and putting stuff on your plate. And partly when you had a one-page report, it was because we did less. Maybe our expectations are too high when there's a pothole in the road that people expect more. Like, is there a gravel road left in Grey County anywhere? I wonder, we've just gone through approximately 14 years of good times with federal and provincial money being thrown during COVID, and certainly from 2008 to 2011, that economic things. At some point, we're going to have to pay that off. When's that coming back to bite us from a provincial funding and federal funding? And what point we start rationalizing and cutting what we're doing? And I still sometimes wonder if we're not trying to do too much and asking our staff to do too much and doing it too quickly. I remember talking to the judge at the back of the court a few years ago that computers are supposed to make life simple. They haven't. It just means that you're expected to do more things and do it faster. And now there's more things going into those reports than there probably would have been that would have come to council for approval. Certainly with lawsuits and insurance, we're expected to do things differently and to a greater degree at municipalities with roads to try and avoid every accident possible. But I sometimes wonder if what we're doing is too much and we've spread ourselves too thin. But that wasn't number 22 in the report, unfortunately. But those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Body. I do not see any other hands, so perhaps it's time now to call the question on the motion before us to receive and implement the recommendations of the Transportation Organizational Review. All those in favor? Is there anyone opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much, Pat, and thank you very much, Deanna.
Thank you so much, Warden.
Well, let's see. Maybe I'll ask. This will take. That will take a while. Yes. What are your thoughts? Okay, so I'm just consulting with the clerk here. Lunch is ready, but I'm going to take the pulse of everyone here. Do we want to push ahead with one other item, or do you want to break now? So push ahead. Yeah. It might make sense just to get through this because then the floor, they're going to want to wait until after the lunch. That's the only thing. Yeah, well, the media will probably appreciate having that done. I'm just discussing that for the sake of the media. It might be good to deal with the item left in open session, and then they might appreciate me having the opportunity to leave once we finish that. All right. I'm going to lick my finger here. Hard to do with a mask. Okay, so we're now going to deal with item 6B. 6C, thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, so that puts Randy on deck. I need a mover and a seconder. Maybe I'll look for somebody online. Councillor Bordignon and Councillor Carlton, because she's kind of bobbing her head. Yes. Okay, Randy.
So I guess it's my turn to be between now and lunch. So I'll do my best. No pressure whatsoever. So the purpose of this report is to consider a proposed plan of subdivision known as Flat Oak Glenelg Phase 2. It's proposing to create a total of 155 residential units consisting of 93 singles, 62 townhouses in the settlement area of Dundalk in the township of Southgate. Next slide. Oh, sorry. The sharing screen's not working. There we go. So the subject lands on the screen are described as part lots 225 and 226 in concession 2 southwest of the Toronto Sydenham Road, as well as includes blocks 131 and 132 of registered plan 16M-85. It's in the geographic township of Proton in Southgate, as I mentioned. The subject lands are over 18 hectares in size. However, the actual area proposed for development is less than half the size of the subject lands. The lands are currently vacant. There's a portion of the subject lands used for agricultural purposes, and there's a portion that contains woodlands and hazard lands. North of the subject lands, as you can see on the map, you can kind of see the green line that's just north of the subject lands. That's the CP rail trail and some vacant agricultural lands. East and south of the subject lands are residential uses, including the approved phase 1 of this development, which is an overall plan development that is currently under construction for phase 1. West of the subject lands is further agricultural uses, some residential uses, and some vacant lands. There were several other applications that were required for this plan development, including a county official plan amendment, a Southgate official plan amendment, and a zoning amendment, all of which have been approved to date. Here's an image of the proposed plan. As I mentioned, 93 singles and 62 townhouse units. There's blocks also for parkland, stormwater management, walkways and trails throughout, open space, future rights of way, and internal roads. The proposed plan would connect to Corbett Street and Atchison Avenue as part of the phase 1 of the development. Additional internal roads would also be constructed to provide access to the lots. And servicing to these lots will be via municipal water and sewer services, and those will be allocated by the township at the time of final approval of each phase of the development. There was a public meeting held on January 27, 2021. Some of the comments received from the public in that they support both phases 1 and 2. And they were hopeful that sewer services will be extended all the way down Glenelg Street in the future so that they can connect to the municipal sewer services. That's something that township staff noted at the public meeting they'll investigate in the future. There's also a question regarding potential impact from this development on the existing residences on Doyle Street, which is east of this subject property. And I'll note that the CP rail trail acts as a divider between the homes on Doyle Street and this planned development. And then any potential impact on the east side of the rail trail from this development should be minimal and should only occur during construction phase. In terms of agency comments received comments from Historic Saugeen Métis and Eastlink and Hydro One. They have no objection to the proposed development. Canada Post indicated that delivery of mail will be through a community mailbox and they will require new civic addresses once the development is approved. Enbridge will require conditions and easements and agreements to be able to service this development at no cost to Enbridge. Same for Bell Canada. Township of Southgate Public Works Department noted that this development will need to be on municipal water, sewer, and stormwater service connections also provided. There's no road widening required, and they noted that the property is within the Wellhead Protection Area Zone D, and therefore DNAPL products are to be managed by education and outreach programs. The Grand River Conservation Authority, so there's kind of a divide between the watersheds between the Grand River and Saugeen Valley in and around this area. So they deferred to the Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority with respect to the review of this development. The Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority staff noted that the subdivision is generally acceptable to staff, provided the recommended conditions of draft approval are included in the draft plan of subdivision approval, and those have been incorporated into the recommended conditions. SVCA also reviewed the most recent proposed plan and noted they have no comments or objections. The Blue Water District School Board, they provided comments and noted they also have no objection to the proposed development. They recommended that sidewalks be included throughout the proposed development, and sidewalks will be provided. They also requested some draft plan conditions regarding accommodation within the existing schools, student busing, and school bus pickup points, and those again have been incorporated into the recommended conditions. Township of Southgate staff presented a report to their council on April 20th of this year, and Township Council passed a motion supporting the proposed plan, subject to recommended conditions of draft approval. And again, those have been incorporated into the recommended conditions. In terms of a planning analysis summary, there was an environmental impact study that was completed for this proposed project. Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority reviewed that EIS. They recommended some mapping revisions to hazard lands and other wetlands, and those were incorporated into the schedules of the County Official Plan Amendment number 6, as well as the associated Township Official Plan Amendment and the zoning. The Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority also recommended conditions, and like I said, those have been incorporated to address any related EIS matters. There was a stage 1 and 2 archaeological assessment that was done for this application, and they concluded there's no further archaeological assessment of the study areas warranted based on their study findings. In terms of the appropriate provision for efficient use of sewer and water services, as noted, this will be serviced by Missile Water and Sewer Services. The subject lands are located within the settlement area Dundalk and is considered, as I mentioned, the second phase of an overall planned development. In terms of the PPS, the principal policy statement speaks to providing an adequate range and mix of housing options and densities to meet projected market-based and affordable housing needs. In this case, the proposed plan of subdivision is proposing singles and townhouse units. It is not known what the price ranges will be for the residential units at this time, and whether or not the units would be considered affordable. At this time, the county has no legislative authority to require a developer to provide affordable units. Other policies in the PPS speak to connected walkable communities with provisions for public parkland and open space. The subdivision will provide connections to planned roads as well as connections to the CP rail trail. And there's also a trail along the southwest boundary of the proposed plan that's being proposed that will connect to some of the park blocks as well that are being proposed in the development. So based on a review of the supporting documents and the comments received, staff are the opinion the proposed subdivision has regard for matters of the Planning Act, is consistent with the provincial policy statement, and conforms to the objectives of the county official plan and the township official plan. And therefore, staff recommend that the subdivision be draft approved, subject to the recommended conditions of draft approval. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, sir. Council, are there any questions? Seeing none, then, oh, Councillor Mill, my apologies.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. And the question of affordability comes up from time to time, as we all know. Southgate, I can assure the council that Southgate has a really good relationship with the builder, the developer, and he has committed as best he can to keeping the pricing, the price point as low as he can to encourage people to invest in the subdivision. And we're quite happy and supportive of his attempts to do that. He's a quality builder, and he's been very good to work with, as I'm sure Randy and the rest of the planning department would vouch. Thank you.
Yes, and I would add very community minded. Anything else, Randy? Any other questions? Councillor Cider?
Yes, and you know, I think builders are, if you approach them and talk to them, more than happy to work with you. We just had a builder in the Blue Mountains that has offered up a price range But there are other builders who don't, but I'm very happy to hear that this builder is. In the case of the Blue Mountains, they're proposing a development with price points from 660 to 1.5 million, plus they're offering in another development which has $2 million plus homes to build a multi-residential building and to include in that building some condo units at cost, which they will sell to the Attainable Housing Corporation at cost. And so the details are still to be worked out. So the developers will do that. I went through a number of these application forms, and I note on the county application form, it says, ask for a price point if known. I think we should be asking for those price points, and we shouldn't accept that it's not known, because obviously a builder is not going to proceed with the development unless they know what their minimum revenue is going to be. So, I think we should be, flagging this issue of affordability with them. And we found anyway, and I guess as Councillor Milne has pointed out, they found as well that, if asked, builders will work with you. Most, some may not, but we have enough development applications in the pipeline that when we do review our official plan in the Blue Mountains, we will do whatever we can to make it easier for those developers that are more accommodating to build. So I think this is good news that there is a range here, and I think that may solve some of our staffing problems on the roads department as well. If people have a place to live, they may be more willing to move up here rather than live some distance from their job. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Swever. I see no further hands, so it's time to call the question on the motion before us to receive the report and to receive all written and oral submissions, and lastly, to approve this plan of subdivision subject to the conditions set out in the notice of decision. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, Randy. Council, I wonder, and Kim, would it be appropriate to deal with 8A? I don't see that taking terribly long, and that's an open session matter.
Council, as you're aware, we discussed briefly at our last meeting, the delegation deadline, the deadline for providing delegation requests for the AMO meeting in August is June 24th. We had a preliminary discussion at our last meeting about possible topics that council might wish to pursue. We've done a little bit of research, and there's a summary here before you. I would say that the second last bullet point there with the Ministry of Education, we had a good meeting for those of you that are part of the Mental Health and Addictions Task Force earlier this week. We heard from both of our school boards, and I'm wondering if consideration might be given to making a slight change there. What we heard from our school board representatives was that they do see a challenge with resourcing the counseling services within the board. And so wondering if rather than the curriculum enhancements that we discussed earlier, whether it might be more appropriate to flag the resources to support counseling services in their counseling resources in the schools. It doesn't need to be an either or, but since that was raised to us, I thought it might be appropriate to bring that forward. And if there's any other comments about any of the other bullet points that are there, happy to hear those. Otherwise, I'll be working with our colleagues in Bruce County and the key staff for each one of these subject matter areas to prepare the briefs. We'll submit the requests and keep our fingers crossed. Sometimes it can be difficult to schedule this many delegation requests, but we'll do our best.
Thank you, council. Anybody want to add anything to the list or any comments? Excellent. Do we need a motion? Oh, okay. Then I'm hearing that we need a motion to approve the list for requests, moved by Councillor Desai, seconded by Councillor O'Leary. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. I'm going to suggest that we break for lunch and come back at 1:05 sharp. Good online? 1:05.
I know.
Sorry, welcome back, everyone. I should have probably allowed a little bit more time than I did. My apologies. It's a little rushed. But we are back together and we're now ready to deal with item number 7, which is a closed meeting matters. So I'm looking for a mover that we go into a closed session to deal with. I have it highlighted here. Bear with me. Advice subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, and litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals. So I need a mover, please. Councillor Body, and I'm looking for somebody online. Sorry, I don't mean to ignore you, just to include them as well. Councillor Bordignon. All those in favor? Is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that is carried. So we need to take a second to